See that over there? That's winter. I'm going that way. So, I get on this line of thought in the last couple of days, when you say things like, if I'd known this 10 years ago, or if I'd known, and I got to thinking, if I would have followed my instincts 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and done the things that I thought I should do, despite the fact they butt conventional wisdom, I'd probably be a multimillionaire today. And this was further bolstered the other night when I'm sitting in a bar. I know, I'm as pure as the driven snow, I know. Talking to a young guy who just got off he was a tour driver. He'd been gone 6 months from the house, and he's going home, and he was doing a music tour. Going back to California, and he's thinking about buying a truck. And I gave him a little bit of advice, and I'll follow it up with the story about not jumping on the opportunity when you have it. And you could see a lot of questions in his eyes, but at the same time, there was the will to want to do it. And I said, dude, if you want to do it, go for it. And one of the biggest lies I was ever told when it came to this was, you can't do it on your own. In some ways that's true, but the way they were wanting it, it was an absolute falsehood. I didn't need their help. They wanted to control what I was doing. And from, the naysayers and people at the company and all that, it's a whole lot easier than you think. And truthfully, had I been smart, I would have bought a truck 15 years sooner than I did. Now, I'll tell you now, I didn't want to dampen this young man's enthusiasm about wanting to be an owner-operator, to own his truck. And I said, he's talking about maybe leasing one. And I said, dude, you don't need to lease one. I said, you need to buy one. And I said, you can do it a whole lot cheaper than leasing. And he looked at me like, what? And then I just explained what I've explained to you guys. I said, people tried to convince me that I couldn't do it, that I had to have their help, that I needed this and this and this, and there was no possible way I could ever own a truck. I was doomed for failure if I didn't do it the way they told me to, and if I didn't do it the way they wanted me to. And they were wrong. They absolutely were wrong. Told you, and I told him the way my buddy did it. I said he found a truck he liked. Did he have the down payment? He had a little money saved up. I said, but he got a signature loan for $5,000 from his local bank. Went through a big bank like, I think he did. He went through Bank of the Ozarks. High interest. First time buyer. And he didn't have a whole lot down. But you know what? He was able to afford his truck. Decent payments. And had it paid off in 3 years. Owns the truck outright. And now he's on to his next truck, and he's probably going to be on to his next truck here soon. I don't know. He keeps talking about retiring, but, and he said the same thing I did. I wish I would have known how easy it was to own a truck, and I would have done this 15 years sooner. So, it starts off there. The story, well, this is where we didn't have the confidence in ourselves to do it because of the naysayers. I'm going to tell you a story about that. Went in and got my coffee. Back in 2002, 2003, me and this guy are sitting here talking, and I'm noticing something. And I noticed this back when I was hauling grain. At the time, there was railroad tracks everywhere, grain cars sitting everywhere, sidings were all full, and we were all hauling grain on rail cars. And I remember asking him, I said, and this is back in 2001, I noticed this. I said, I wonder how long it's going to take for these companies to realize these cars are just sitting here and they can haul it instead of paying me, what they're paying me to haul it, 70, what was I making? I was making 93%, and then they were taking like 20% out for trailer lease. I was making pretty good money. So I was making the truck was making right at about 75%, I think, if I remember correctly. So between 75 and 80%. But all the trucks were hauling all the grain, the trains weren't. And don't get me wrong, there wasn't a whole lot of money in it. It just, high percentage doesn't mean high pay, 50% of nothing, still nothing. So, about 3 years later, and by this time I'd already moved out, you started seeing a whole lot more of these bottom dump train cars. Well, in 2003, I look around and I notice the trains, and I'm starting to see containers. And I looked at my buddy and I said, you know what? We can go buy about 10 of these Walmart cab overs for about $5,000 a piece at the time. And I said, if we form a company and haul containers from port to yard or rail yard, or just back and forth, I said I just see this happening. And we really discussed it and laid it out and thought it was a real viable plan at the time. And where I live, it's a real viable plan because we have a lot of what do you call them, like duty free or tax exempt zone. Free trade zones. There's a free trade zone not too far from my house, in fact. And there was a big one in Kansas City where all the containers moved in and out from the rail cars and up and down the river and all that. And so we talked about it, we penciled it out. We didn't know where to get the money. See, we didn't know about venture capitalists and stuff like that. We just didn't know how to get the money. And we struggled and we tried and we really thought about it, and we just were like, you know what? We kept hitting walls, and we really just never got off the ground because we couldn't figure out quite how to get this done. Well, let me tell you what happened with that. About 3 years later, it exploded. Now, what got me thinking about this was there was a company called England. We all have heard of them. At the time, they had 14 container drivers. They were just trying it out. And when a company that big is trying it, and you're starting to see orange containers, and you're starting to see name brands, and you're starting to see, a particular company out of Arkansas really starting to get into it, and you're seeing a lot more semi-trailers on train cars, something's up. Well, like I said, we just couldn't get it together. Well, about 3 years later, a company in my area exploded. And that was Transco Lines. TLI, I believe. And I truly believe had we got that business going, we would have exploded, and they probably would have bought us out. But had I known, like I said, what I know now 10 years ago, we would have done it. And this is what I'm coming around to, is that if you sit around and wait for the opportunity, most of the time it's not going to come around, even when you see it. Because when you notice the opportunity, you have to make your move. And we didn't make our move, and we paid for it. And as you know, I'm not a multi-millionaire. I drive Crown Vics, and I fix them with junk parts. Now, don't get me wrong. I've had an exceptional life so far. I've done very well here. I've done very well in a lot of the other places I've been. But I heard a wise man once say, you can't be afraid to make a move. If you have a solid idea and you think it's going to go for it. Well, what if you fail? What if you don't? You will never know. And that's the thing that we struggled with today. We'll never know if we could have been successful. We might have ended up just completely bankrupt. We'll never know. Because we did not make our move. we listened to people that didn't have our best interest in mind. You know, it's like when I first started looking at trucks to buy, I've always wanted to own my own truck since I started driving. And I remember looking at a Peterbilt at Kansas Truck Center in 01. It was the fall of 01. And they had this really cool 94 Pete it was a 379. Had a Caterpillar in it. You know, manual, all that. They didn't really have the automatics and whatnot then. They weren't really a thing. They had the auto shifts, but we've talked about how horrible they were. And I remember looking at this truck thinking, this truck is $24,000. How will I ever get that kind of money? The problem wasn't that I didn't have the money. The problem was that I'd limited myself here on what I thought I was capable of doing. Who knows what could have been possible? I just bought this truck I'm sitting in for $72,000, and I was wondering about a $24,000 truck. And at the time, the truck was only 6-7 years old. It really wasn't that old. And I remember thinking, that's so much money. You know, I wasn't forward thinking. I had limited myself because I couldn't see the possibility. And that's kind of what I was getting at with the guy in the bar. I did not want him to be limited by his own negativity, by people who don't have his best interest in mind. When I started talking about buying my first truck, you know, my dad, he was shocked. He's like, why would you do this? You're losing your benefits, you're losing this, you're losing that, you're losing this. And I said, no, I'm gaining a lot too. But when you're dealing with a guy from the silent generation who grew up 9 to 5, like most of our parents did, like most everybody did, you go to work, you get a paycheck, you get your benefits, you go on. And in this business, that doesn't really exist anymore. The company driver still got it, but the insurance is crap and the retirements suck. Not like they used to be. But I digress. My dad was fearful. He's like, you know, this, that, and the other thing. And I said, you know, I can do this. I have to do this. I want to do this. I said, this is the next logical step in the ladder that I'm climbing. And boy, he was so against it. And I remember thinking, you know, I'm not going to go against my dad, but at the same time, I am a grown man. And he has to realize that he has to let me fail. You know, I know my dad loved me and he didn't want me to fail. But at the same time, I remember thinking, he has to know the facts. So one day I just sat down with him and I laid all the numbers out. I told him what I was going to make. I told him how this worked, this, and this. And of course, this was, let's not talk about the Affordable Care Act. But once I laid all the numbers out and put it in black and white for him, because he was a numbers guy, he was like, I get it. And a lot of times that's what we have to do to with our families. Now, I'm not going to encourage married guys with small kids right now to abandon their good paying jobs with health insurance and benefits to go buy a truck and be on their own. That would be kind of foolish. The insurance is too expensive. But, you know, if this is a dream and you got a significant other, talk it over with them. A lot of times they're a whole lot more receptive than you give them credit for. There's a lot of guys out here where owning a truck is their dream. And I want you guys to fulfill that dream. But don't wait 15 years and dwell on it 15 years like I did before doing something about it. Like, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told that kid the other night. If I had known how easy it was to own a truck, I would have done this back in my 20s. It was shockingly easy. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of risk. There's a lot of reward. There's a lot of work. There was a lot of angst, and there was a few lean times. But at the same time, the truck itself is very easy to own. And if you're leased onto a good company and you have good contacts, the money's out there, guys. You know, one of these days, I would like to do a video on brokers and stuff like that. I know brokers. I've got friends who do it. And at this point, the only thing I'm going to say is that the stuff we read on Facebook, these are bad brokers. There's a lot of good brokers out there. The problem is that a lot of these good brokers are being pigeonholed by the bad ones. We can't get the bad ones run out of the industry fast enough, because the minute we get a bad one run out, another one takes their place. So, but one of these days I'll do a video on that. But it's, if you have a dream and you have an idea, don't wait. Put your ducks in a row. Decide if this is something that you want to do, and go for it. You'll never know if you can do it until you do. I know people don't like to fail. Failing at things like this suck. But at the same time, they're like, what if you fail? And I'm like, what if you don't? What if you are the next millionaire? You know, there was a guy that had the same dream as me about containers, and he put it to use. And that guy is a millionaire today. It's good for him. He took an idea that a bunch of us probably had, and he made it work. And that's what I want you guys to do. Take these ideas you have and make them work. Because I'll tell you right now, an idea on the shelf is just that. These ideas aren't unique. You're not the only one with this idea. These ideas are universal. There's more than one person out here that's going to see the need. And if you sit there and you have a way to put these ideas to fruition, or you have an idea how to just make a go at something, go for it. My buddy, I got a buddy of mine that did that. He's been hopping in and out of all these different truck things, and different guy. But I'll tell you what he did. I got a friend of mine out in western Kansas who does a little bit of everything. He says, you know, you don't pigeonhole yourself into one thing. You have 3, 4, 5 things going. Passive income, passive income, passive income. It puts it all together. It creates real income. And when COVID started and everybody went nuts, he had a bunch of trailers, a couple of trucks, but he had a bunch of trailers. And he noticed that people needed trailers, so he started leasing trailers. And then when the trailers were paid for and the money was out of it and it started going back down, he sold all his trailers. He made his money back. You know, and then he saw a need somewhere else, so he bought into that, did that, and when he saw the money going out of that, he sold that and moved on to something else. The guy's sitting here finding opportunity where you wouldn't think it is, and he's making a go of it. Nothing wrong with that. It's kind of the same thing that I've been talking about. And him and I are both very upset that we allowed people who didn't have our best interest in mind to talk us out of it, because these people were failures themselves. And since they failed, they were positive that we were going to also. You can't do that. Who says I can't? You know, I remember a line from a book. It's old. It was one of my favorite books called The Fountainhead. And the guy says, I'm going to go off to the big city and be an architect. And the guy looks at him and says, who's going to let you? And he said, the more important question is, who's going to stop me? Guys, that's the question you should ask yourself. Not who's going to let you, who's going to stop you. There's a lot of guys out there that are brilliant. A lot of young guys out here, and I hope there's some young guys here watching this video that I can inspire with this. There's a lot of brilliance out there, and if you have an idea that you're just positive it's going to go for it. The worst you can do is fail. And even if you do fail, you might look back and realize this is where it went wrong. So you might try it again and then try something else and succeed. You know, never be afraid to fail. Never be afraid to succeed. If you guys have an idea, don't wait 10 and 15 years like I did. You know, don't get me wrong, I've done well, but I do know deep down I could have done a whole lot better had I listened to myself and followed the dream and the plan that I saw laid out before me. I don't regret it, but sometimes it does kind of make me wonder. That's really all I have today, guys. You know, got me thinking the other night about just had I done this 10 years ago. There's a lot of opportunity out there, and if you're young and you see it, even if you're old and you see it, the worst you can do is fail. The best you can do is succeed. You're not going to know till you try. And if you got a solid idea and you just think in your heart of hearts you can make a go of it, it doesn't matter what other people say. They're not the one putting skin in the game. I don't really listen to people that don't have any skin in the game, guys. They might have some good advice, but at the same time you have to take it all with a grain of salt. If they just want to dole out advice and they're not willing to put it on the line, just take it with a grain of salt and walk on. If you're positive you can do it, go do it. And I guarantee you, win or lose, you're going to be glad you did regardless, because you're going to get some valuable experience out of it. And like I said, the best you can do is succeed. If you fail, you failed. I mean, there's nothing wrong with failing when you gave it your best. It didn't work out, but like I said, it just might. So keep your chin up, guys, and do good work and hope for the best. That's all I got tonight, man. You guys take it easy. We'll see you next video.